Morning. Would you please tell us how you are presently employed?
Yeah, well, I'm self-employed. I do consulting work both here on the mainland and in Asia.
And would you briefly describe what positions you have held, what elected positions you have held?
I was a member of the House of Representatives, then Lieutenant Governor, and then Governor from 1986 to 1994. I also served as a member of the 1978 Constitutional Convention.
And you are trained as an attorney, is that correct?
Yes.
At some point in your political career, did you become conscious of concerns about preserving agricultural lands in Hawaii?
I became conscious of that before my political career.
And what were the nature of the concerns that you became aware of at that particular junction?
Well, I grew up on a big island in the middle of the plantations, Almacoa plantation. So agriculture was part of my lifestyle, and also on the Paca Ranch area and so forth. So by the time you get to the 1970s, when I'm getting active, I would say, the preservation of agricultural lands was an issue that we felt strongly about.
And did you address that issue, or was that issue addressed in the 1978 Constitutional Convention?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in the 1978 Constitutional Convention, we had all of the stakeholders, come in and work with us. Those of us that wanted to preserve agricultural lands, those of us that felt that in order to sustain agriculture, they needed the ability to maybe sell some of it off, and those of us who just didn't see the need for it as strongly as the rest, as others. We all came together and evolved an agreed-upon constitutional amendment, which is now in our Hawaii State Constitution, setting out the state's mandate to preserve prime agricultural land.
And in the course of your administration as governor, what, if any, steps were taken to try to enforce that mandate to preserve agricultural lands?
Well, it was part of our criteria, whenever we approach any zoning issues. The other area that was part and parcel of the same effort was the establishment of the Water Commission to make sure that there was enough water both for urbanization and for agriculture. And a whole bunch of various activities, most of which you can read probably in the checkered history of my little career.
Well, can you summarize some of those activities just so we have a little bit of background?
Yeah, I think the one thing we wanted to do more than anything else, now prior to my administration, we also had the functional plans, agricultural functional plans that were put together by Governor Ariyoshi. And we tried, one of the things we wanted to do was to implement those kinds of planning activities. So we established the Office of State Planning, which is part of my office, and what their job was to do was to look at the sustainability of agriculture. One area in which we really had a concern and a priority was the development of farming, as opposed to plantation-style agriculture, which any one of us knew that would, had a finite period of productivity. So the development of farmland activity in places like Waimanalo and under the Everplains was very much a part of our priority.
Why are those concerns particularly relevant today, those same concerns?
Well, the same concerns are particularly relevant, well, they never stopped being relevant. And one of the things we did was try to pass the law that would implement the Constitutional Convention. Sorry to say, it took a long time afterwards for that to happen, to actually pass an act that recognized the priority of prime agricultural lands. And part of that act also called for rules and regulations. Now, why is this important? It's important because today, this is 20 years later, plantation agriculture has pretty much gone its path, and we are looking at a situation that occurs after thousands of homes have already been approved, which didn't exist 20 years ago. So it's, if it was important then, it's even more important now.
What are you recommending to the Land Use Commission, in this case involving prime agricultural lands in the Everglades?
Well, I think it's very important that we preserve as much of it as possible. You know, it's not just a matter of soils and location, it's also water. And the one thing about the agricultural plains is it has affordable water as well as good soils and successful farms. I mean, what we were trying to do 20 years ago exists on the Everglades. So it makes very little sense in my mind to urbanize that area.
Thank you. No further questions.
Petitioner?
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, man. I'm Mr. Key.
During your governorship between 1986 and 1994, would you consider your administration to be in strong support of the urbanization of Eva and the development of the second city that now exists at Campo Lake?
Yeah, we were very strong supporters of the second city development in Eva.
Was your administration also a strong advocate for affordable housing in the state?
Yes, because in those days, our land use commission required 60% of the housing, any housing development to be affordable.
Is it true that your administration also supported and facilitated the development of the villages at Campo Lake, which is a residential development in Eva?
Yes.
And that the lands of the villages of Campo Lake were prime agricultural lands?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Ho'opili project? Have you reviewed its master plan, the urban ag plan, or any of the documents relating to this particular petition?
I have some general idea, most of which was public information. I should distinguish that the reason why I feel strongly about this particular case is the fact that we had already urbanized thousands and thousands of house lots. And even doing our plans, the area that is now under consideration was actually taken out of the second city as an agricultural base for that community. So yes, we did very strongly support the second city, but it was part of an overall plan that included the continuation of agriculture. Because part of that was the fact that eventually we got the water from Waihe'e Ditch, and the state took that over.
Is it true that during your administration, you also, through the State Land Use Commission, reclassified approximately 200 acres at Eva from ag to urban for the 1,500 residential unit project called West LUC Estates?
West LUC, I think, was Frank's project. Was it? No. Mine?
But
well, we were in competition, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, I know we urbanized at least that much land for the development of home.
Now, you mentioned the Office of Planning, which was created under your administration.
Right.
Are you aware that the Office of Planning now is a required party to all proceedings before this commission?
I think they were required party, or at least they were a participant in all proceedings of my administration as well.
In fact, they're participating in this particular proceeding as representing the position of the state.
Right.
Okay. Are you aware that the Office of Planning under your administration supported much of the development of the Eva region before this commission in the reclassification of agricultural lands to the urban district?
Right.
Are you aware that the Office of Planning today is in support of the reclassification of Ho'opili from agriculture to the urban district?
Right, and as I said, this is 20 years later and thousands of homes later. If they were still part of my administration, I can assure you they wouldn't be supporting the reclassification now.
Are you aware that in 1977, before you became governor, that the city's plans for this area designated Ho'opili for urban expansion?
The entire area was looked at as for its potential as, for the development of a second city. But as the urbanization occurred and the new farm production began, then people had to make adjustments. I mean, the real problem is, this is 20 years later. 20 years ago, there was nothing there. There was no houses, nothing approved, no places to go. Today you have all of that infrastructure in place, and you are now looking at the urbanization of the last section, really, of prime agricultural lands that has a successful farm operation on it. And at some point, you've got to do what every planning department, I think, does, and that is balance this all out. One thing that the Land Use Commission did when I was in office was we also reviewed existing approvals. And if it didn't look like those people were going to actually follow through with the urbanization, we would have taken it away. So, you know, it's not just a question of new urbanization, it's also reviewing what else is on the books.
Now, I already stated in 1977, when the city adopted its general plan, Ho'opili was already designated for urban expansion. Are you aware that in the 1980s, the early 1980s, before you became governor, the city's EVA master plans, which evolved into what is called the Kapolei Long Range Master Plan, included this particular petition area, Ho'opili, and designated it for urban use in the long term?
Yes, but again, you're talking about a situation that had, at that time, sugar cane, which was then going out of production. And so people were looking at these lands as possible sites for a second city, all of that area. Today, you're looking at a situation where you have already thousands of homes approved, and the only productive farming, I mean the most productive, not only, but the most productive agricultural lands in the state being up for reclassification. So I would think that in 20 years, we may need to adjust. So, you know, yeah, it may have been then, but it shouldn't be now.
Did the state at any time during your administration oppose the city with regard to its development plans or the general plan amendments that were going through that clearly showed Ho'opili for urban use?
You know, I really don't know how much attention we paid to the city. Because in that, you know, in that area, we were also looking at the idea of putting the entire area into a Kaka'ako-like zone, where the state would have the, no offense meant to the city people, but where the state would have the ultimate say on what the urbanization of the second city was going to look like. The second city was very important to them.
Now, your administration supported affordable housing, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us how your administration supported the construction of affordable housing in our state?
Well, one thing we did was we had a requirement that all new urbanization approvals include 60% affordable housing in the mix. And the second thing was that we, when we looked at the market conditions on Oahu, it was obvious to us that there were very few landowners involved that were drolling out property. And so the other thing we did was essentially negotiate condemnations and brought property in to the market. That and a bunch of other things.
Do you still today support affordable housing?
Yes.
would your position on Ho'opili change if you knew that Ho'opili is being proposed to develop a significant portion of its residential units in the affordable and gap group housing arena?
I think I would be more comfortable with everything if, number one, if we had agricultural lands that were being substituted for the lands that were taken out that had the same price of water that Ho'opili enjoys, that whole area. And so, you know, it's not just a question of soils. It's a question of infrastructure for the production of agriculture. So I don't know where else you can go on Oahu that provides water. I think I would be more comfortable with the, if the Land Use Commission would review existing housing requirements, like we did with White Kelly, and see whether or not any of that should be de-urbanized. And then come up with a plan that was much more cognizant of the realities of today. So it's not, even to me, I don't think the approval is just site-specific. I mean, there are ramifications that go way beyond the particular site.
No further questions.
Tony?
Thank you.
No questions for the Governor.
Well, not even about the city.
I just have one area of clarification. I heard you say that the Constitutional Convention passed out a provision in the Constitution to protect agriculture, but that unfortunately it took a fairly long time to actually pass a law to implement that constitutional provision. Do you remember that part of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
And just for the record, with the law that you're referring to that was designed to implement the constitutional provision regarding agriculture, is that the process by which lands would be designated as important agricultural lands?
Right.
That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Dudley?
Governor, you mentioned the villages of Kapolei. You didn't mention them by name, but you talked about the state taking certain. Can you tell us about a little bit more about what you were doing out there and what your intentions were? And I know well, let's start with that, and I'll come back to the question.
Yeah, our intentions were to facilitate the development of a second city on the Everplain.
And by the second city, did you mean the city itself, or did you mean an entire area with associated things with a downtown section?
Yeah, we meant an integrated community that not only provided residents, but also created employment opportunities. Yeah, so it would be, they would have an urban core, they would have residents, and hopefully they would have some businesses out there.
Okay. And was the harbor a part of that?
Yes.
And the industrial park was part of that?
Yes.
And over in the other side, the marina was all part of that?
Right.
And Governor, aren't all of these things relatively close to the seashore rather than up into the higher ground?
I guess so. If you're going to have a harbor, you ought to put it by the ocean.
And Governor, is it true in your knowledge that there are, as you get farther away from the mountains, you come into more scrublands where there's less dirt and more coral?
I believe so. I haven't, actually gone out there for a long time.
Okay. The other question I have then is, you have all of these things, and then you formed the villages of Kapolei too, which the state did. Yet, this area, as far as the state was concerned, always remained still in agriculture. Is that right?
Yes, it was an agricultural community.
Good. And Governor, there's just one more thing on another topic, which you also brought up, which was about equal land. If you would feel more comfortable if there was equal land. Would you include equal sunshine in that?
Yeah, I don't think it's just about prime soil. It's also about water, location, sunshine. It's all whatever. There are other factors that need to be considered. So it's not simply that there's land over there that you can grow something.
Good. And Governor, one last question then. Are you aware that in the present plan, that 30% of the houses are affordable, but 70% are unaffordable?
The last person I talked to thought they were all unaffordable, but yes, I know that they changed the requirement. And I don't know what the requirement is now. Now, you know, in all fairness, the 60% affordable housing requirement was necessary for a particular period in time. And I don't know whether you would have that kind of requirement today, where you have you don't have as hot a housing market. I mean, the 60% affordable housing requirement would happen during as a response to the Japanese bubble. And I think it was a good policy for that time. I think, you know, like everything else, we need to evolve. And so 30% may be appropriate. I wish they were all affordable, but they are economic reality.
Thank you. No more questions, sir.
Ms. Yorkla?
No questions.
Mr. Seitz, redirect?
No further questions.
Commissioners, questions? Governor, just so you know, the Land Use Commission recently de-urbanized a property on the Big Island.
Congratulations.
And we're being sued.
That's when you know you're doing your job.
So if you could leave your card, we might. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.